Hey everybody, so today I'm going to show you how to get project data from BIM360 through Autodesk Forge and the BIM360 API. We're going to be using Postman to do that. Postman makes it really easy to do this stuff as well. So if you don't know what BIM360 is, take a look at this documentation. Also, if you don't have admin rights to your BIM360 account, you won't be able to do what I'm going to show you, but unless you can get somebody that does have admin rights to add your Forge app to the BIM360 hub, and then you can do stuff. If you want to learn more about Postman, and from my understanding, it's kind of used for testing and designing APIs. I don't do any of that. I just use it to interact and test API requests. But if you want to read more, definitely check that out. We won't go in depth on creating a Forge app. It's really easy to do, and I'll show you where you need to go to do that. But it's really easy to set up an app. We will take a look at creating. So I'll show you how to add a Forge app, which is easy as well. But we won't actually go through that step by step. I will though go through step by step how to create a Postman environment. Or sorry, an authentication post and a get project request post. I will show you the post environment, but I've already got that set up. Very easy to do. I'll show you exactly what you need to get that set up. And so, again, we're going to create a Forge app. You'll just need to jump out to My Apps and sign that in. And then when you create your app, you need to add it to BIM360. Again, you need to be an admin to do that, or have an admin do that, and just jump out to settings, custom integrations, and actually and then over here to add custom integrations, and then that'll get you set up with an app on BIM360. And that just tells BIM360 that you can talk to it pretty much. The environment that I've set up is will host a few different global variables that we'll use, and this will allow us to be able to use these variables for many requests without having to retype it in or rerun requests. There's one missing for the access token, and we're going to use that access token. So when we do a post for the authentication stuff, it'll give us responses of an access token, and then we'll post that access token up to that global variable so that we can reuse it as well. So we'll look at that and see how that's set up. We'll create our authentication post, or our authentication request. We'll look at the documentation of that. I think the most important thing of all this, because getting everything set up, the environment, the app, that's all easy to do, but it may take a minute to understand the request formats and what you need for different things. But after you get the hang of that, pretty much anything on BIM360 or even the data management API is available to you. You can start to create some really cool stuff. This will parse the JSON file that we get back from our authentication post, and then grab the access token and then put it in our environment so that we can use that access token on other requests. So I wanted to point that out because that's an important step. And I will actually, I'll show you. We'll just paste that information in there. So I'll show you where that needs to go and everything. And then, finally, we're going to actually get the project data. And so that's really easy to do, and we'll look at the information we need to get that set up in Postman. And again, after you figure that out and get the hang of it, you can do almost anything else in here. As long as you're getting data, you're safe. But I do want to point out that there are things like patching and posting. Posting means you're putting new projects up. You're creating new projects. Patching is when you're updating that information, or updating that data up on BIM360. And things could get pretty dangerous with some of those requests. And you can also potentially delete models. I'm not sure if you can do that on BIM360. I think the only option is to archive stuff. So you may be safe there, but there are some things to think about when you're messing with the API. Finally, there is a Discord channel. Feel free to, our Discord server. Feel free to check that out. BIM and data science. That's kind of the focus of it. If you're interested in that, it's totally free. Join it and post your questions or chat with other folks. But feel free to join if you like. All right, to jump straight into it, I've already got an app created. I'm going to share the client ID and client secret because that's important for our setting up our environments and other things. But this will be gone by the time you get into it, so don't try to use this. Just create your own. I do want to point out a couple things, or just one really. The this callback URL, you can put anything you want there for this type of app. Not a big deal. This is just something I threw in there, but you can put anything because you may get an error and you may not know what to put there. So just put exactly what I have or anything. To create your app, just go sign in and then go to My Apps and then create your app. The only API we're using is the BIM360 API. The cool thing is you can always come back to your app and actually edit it and add other APIs. I've had to do that. I've had to add the data management API to one of my apps, and so there may be instances where you need to do that. So after you have your app created, and that's really easy to do, you need to jump over to your BIM360 account. And you need to be an admin to do this, or have an admin add your app to the account. And then after and to do that, you would just click on Add Custom Integrations. And you can see here we've already got an app added to BIM360. Again, super easy to do especially if you're already an admin. The one thing it does show you when you're in there, and I'm not going to click on details, but is it does need the client ID, which you saw in the app, or in the Forge app, that information. But it does show you the account ID, your BIM360 account ID. You can always get that information from the link of the page of where you're at. If you're on the account, you can see it up here next to admin. You can always highlight it and grab it there. I want to point that out too, that IDs are very important. I've got another video coming out that'll show you how to automatically link BIM360 models, and the IDs, there's item IDs, there's project IDs. All that stuff is really important for that workflow. So always keep that in mind when you're working with this stuff. So I've already created an environment, and I'll show you that real quick. So to create a new environment, you just click New, click on Environment, and then you can see here I've got one set up. Just match what I've got here. And so client's ID, client secret, BIM360 account ID, access token. The client ID and client secret you can all get from your Forge app. The BIM360 account ID, you can just go out to your account and then get it from the URL, and just paste that information into your environment, and then click Save. After your environment's set up, and I'm going to jump back to collections. When your environment's set up, just make sure to change your environment to whatever environment you've created. So this one's called My App Environment. So I've selected that one so that I can use those variables from that environment. Now I created a collection. All you have to do is click New, Collection. And then down here I've created a request called Auth. You can see it says Get. Now if we jump over to the documentation, we can quickly see this is a post request. And so the reason why this says Get is because in the actual request I just need to click Save. But if you by default it says Git. You just need to choose the correct one from here, and in the documentation it always tells you. Now real quick, I just want to point out what the differences are. So Git is getting data. We're going to use that in our project request to actually get data, the project data. So we're going to get that data. This one we're going to post because we're posting all the authentication information, and then it gives us a response. It does give us a response of the access token. But post could also be like posting a project, which is creating a new project on BIM360. Put, I haven't seen the use of put in BIM360, but they seem to be interchangeable, these terms, because in the Azure in an Azure blob, if you use put, which you can see over here, I've got a couple requests set up. These interact with the Azure blob, and I'll have a video in the future that'll show you. Well, actually, we won't dive into the Azure stuff, but to point it out for this one, it uses put to upload new data, just like using post in BIM360 to create new data. So the terms seem to be interchangeable, at least some of them. Patch is like updating data, so you can see here I've got 2 patch requests, one for users and projects. I was able to quickly patch a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I just want to point out that doing things like post or patch could be pretty dangerous. I don't think you can delete things on BIM360. You can archive them, but deleting them, I don't think you can. But posting and patching could be pretty bad if you go in there and patch accidentally every single project. Maybe you have thousands of them and you totally delete all their names. You could get in a big mess. So I just want to point that out. You need to be pretty careful when you're out there. So I've created a header already, and we're actually going to read through this so that you kind of can start to get the hang of this. But the first thing is the URI. And so all we need to do is copy for this one. All we need to do is copy this and paste it here. And then the second thing, and these aren't a big deal for what we're trying to do, but the second thing is, you can see this is headers. So we just need to go to our headers tab in BIM360, or sorry, in Postman, and then pretty much match this. So our content type, and you can see I've already typed it in under our key. And then for our value, we'll put application / XW form URL encoded. And so we'll put that there. And then we're good. The headers are set up. Now we need to jump to the body structure. So if we jump over to body, you can see, we'll need to change none to the format that we said that we were going to use over in the headers. So we'll change that to the correct format. And now what we need to do is the same thing. We need to add our client ID, so the key. And you can remember we added client ID in the environment. And so this is the exact spot where that's going to come in handy, because now what we can do is just, instead of typing in the client ID here, we can just use our global variable, and we can just bring in client ID. And you can see here when it's like this orange color, like if it's red, it means that it's an error, something's not working. But as soon as it goes green, you can see now we have our client ID. Next is our client secret. So over here we'll do client secret. And now we're going to do our grant type. And then we'll just do client credentials. Now, I haven't needed to do this, but what this is asking is you can give it different grant types. You can say, sometimes you can, and I haven't done this on another request, but you can say the grant type is user-based. So it can only allow that user to do the things that that user has access to. So if they only have access to 2 projects, then that's the only thing they can interact with. They can't. In this case, we're going to use the client credentials. We're going to be able to interact with anything that that account has, so any project that account has. But if you're using like a user ID, then whatever that user permission level is, and whatever they have access to is what essentially that app or that request is going to have access to. The scope. So for now, we're going to leave this blank. We're going to jump over to the Get Projects API because that'll tell us what scope we need. But a scope, because you can add a bunch of different scopes, but the scope it's telling when you create the authentication and you get a access token and you use it in your request, that access token then goes to the API and it tells it what you're allowed to not do or do. Are you allowed to read data? Are you allowed to write data or create new data? And so that's what that scope is for. And so if we jump over to Get Projects and if we just read in our resource information, you can see required scopes, and then it just says account read. And if you want to read more about scopes, because there's a ton of different ones, just jump out to, there's some documentation on it in BIM360. So you can read up on different scopes. But I have like a couple different apps that have like 6 different scopes to them. Just because it's interacting with it at different levels. So with that, now we know what the scope is. So we just paste that over here. So we have account read. So all we're doing is we're getting information down. And the reason why, like in this instance, it's fine. We can just put one scope. But like this is just one authentication post request. And if you remember, when we get the access token, we want to make sure that's written to a global variable so that we can go to like multiple GET requests and then just run them without having to add in new scopes. So like in here, you would add a whole bunch of different scopes, and maybe you have a bunch of different requests. Like I can run this authentication here, and I can do a post, I can do a GET, I can do a patch, because within that authentication post, it has a lot more scope to it. But for this example, we'll just leave it at that. But I want to point it out if you get errors, if you're trying to do other things. The next thing we need to do is, if we keep scrolling, we'll see that that's all we need. We've got it set up. And this is like some of the response errors you'll get. This is the response, the actual response you'll get. And the information that we'll need. So we'll get a token type. When it expires, we'll get an access token, which is really important. And then this is like the format in that response. So here's the request. And then here is the response to that request. So we'll get token type, expires in, and access token. So this really long string here. But before we run this, I want to jump over the test and just copy in this code here. So just copy that in, and I'll, if I remember, just reach out. If I don't, I'll try to post it in the comments so you can just paste it in. So with that set up, what we're going to do is click send. And then boom, you can see we've got a response of our access token, and so we'll need that information. And real quick, so you can see we've got that response. If I pull this out a little bit, you can see this is our environment. And I can't remember if I said, but make sure you apply the correct environment after you create one. But you can see if we click on this, that code that we pasted into the test portion, when we ran it and got our response, it looked at that response, parsed it, and then grabbed out the access token and updated it here. So now we have our access token sitting here and all our other information, and now we can just leave that as is and then just reference those global variables as needed for our other request. So just like we created this one, what we're going to do is jump over to new, and we're going to create a new request. We're going to call this one project underscore, actually we don't need a underscore, project data. And then we'll do that in our collections, our my collections, whatever you named it. So I'll do save. This one's already defaulted correctly. It is a GET request, so that works out. We don't need to change that. And then in BIM3 or in the Forge documentation, we'll just jump over to the GET projects. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but Autodesk Forge, if you come out here, you can click on documentation, and then within this tab, they've got all this stuff. Just click on this BIM360 API reference, and then within the API reference, click on account admin, and then we'll click on projects, and then get projects. And if you saw back on documentation, there is an authentication one. That's where you would go for the authentication stuff. So if I click on documentation again, just to show you, you can see it right here. So just click on API reference, and then I'll take you out to the right spot. So from here, we'll do the same thing. We'll read these and kind of see what's important. So first thing is to grab our URI. And we will post that up here. And you can see automatically it auto-populated. So that's what this does here. You can see it auto-populated this account ID. And so we'll need that information. That's what that BIM360 account ID is for. So we'll do the same thing like what we did with the other ones. So we'll look at that, check the name, we'll see BIM360 account ID. So that's what we'll have to put between here. And so we're good to go. Now if we scroll down, you can see it needs the read. We've already got that set up. So our headers, the authorization, and then our token. So if we jump over to headers, we can leave all this as is. We'll come down here and we'll do authorization, and then over here we'll have to type in barrier, and then our and then again we'll have to jump out here, and then we'll just type in our access token. Okay, now with that set up, we'll scroll down, we'll see that we've already got this created, but that's what this is pointing out, the URI parameters. That's what this is here, and that's what was automatically generated over in the parameters tab, the account ID. So if you see that in other requests, that's what that is. And now the query string parameters, and if we jump back over to parameters, we can add these ones, and that you can see here query parameters. And so we'll have one for limit, and so this could be 10, 100. 100 is max, which is kind of annoying. And so we just type in limit, and then over here to the right we'll type in 100. And then if you wanted to get, so depending on how many projects you have, you may have a lot more than 100. So if you wanted to grab all of them, you'd have to add an offset. And so you can see that over here. And then you can offset by 100 or 200, and then you can keep rerunning it. I don't know a good way to loop through it without having to retype it a bunch of times. But a really good way, or actually, let me pull this out and we'll expand this, is if you click on this button here called Code, you can pick a variety of different languages to convert this to, and then you can have the actual request converted to, in this case, Python, and then you can bring that over, and then you can use a while loop. So like for this instance, we're trying to get project data. Say you have 500 projects up there. Well, you could essentially take the you can pretty much loop through the request. So you can loop through it. You can say while, you can, when you get a return and that return list has something in it, when that return list equals nothing, then quit the while loop. So you could do something like that in Python. So I just want to point that out, that this is really helpful if you want to jump it just straight over to code and be able to do things like that. So for this one, we'll just turn off offset. And if we just look over here again, these ones, none of these are required. I think it says right here, it'll default at 10. So none of these are required, but we put in 100, so we'll get 100 responses. And then we're good to go. So we can run this, and it should be good. So we've got our response. So this is what some of our errors will look like. And then we've got our body structure. And so this is the response we're going to get. We're going to get the ID, account ID, names, start date, end date. I mean, just all of this data. The cool thing about this is, like, we can run this, get all this data, and maybe you have vision. Like, maybe for a long time you were just not updating your projects correctly, and you have a lot of this information in a vision database or some other database. Well, this could be one way that you could pull this data down, get it updated really quickly, and then push it or patch it all back up there. And that's where, like, when you want to patch a bunch of projects or update a bunch of project data, that's where, like, project ID is really, really handy. But anyways, this is the request. If you're familiar with BIM360, you're familiar with this data because it's required to some of it. I think it's just the name is required. But this is all fields that you can fill out when you're creating your project. And then down here is the response. And so in here, let's just go ahead and we'll run it in Postman, and then down here we should get a response. And you can see that our token hasn't been provided. So we will jump back over here. We'll see our access token. That should be good. So maybe if we run our authentication again, we'll rerun this. Okay, I had to pause it. I made a very silly mistake. So here, right before access token, just needed to add a space. Now, if we run it, you can see we get a response back. I'm not going to scroll through that data, but it's also going to be blurred out as well, or at least the important stuff. But test it and then let me know if you get any errors or any issues with it. And then I can try to help you troubleshoot it. But what you could do from here is, now you have that data, you can dump it out. from here and bring it into Power BI or Excel or maybe into another database or a SQL server or something. But you can do a variety of different things with it. As an example, I was able to bring down a bunch of data about projects, update them very quickly with some information, and then take that information and push it back up to BIM360 and automatically update it. So you can build amazing applications when you know how to do stuff like this. You can automatically create projects. You can automatically add users. I mean, you can do a lot of things when you start to understand the BIM360 API. It's incredibly powerful. Autodesk Forge does have a lot of powerful things, but BIM360 just has there's so many things that could benefit a firm if they're not leveraging that stuff already. So definitely check it out. Let me know if you have any questions or issues or run into any errors. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out. And if you like the video, definitely subscribe if you want to. Also, like the video if you liked it. But I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.